The Secret of 1944. What do Nurse Eleanor's letters reveal about forgotten love? In 2024, during the demolition of an abandoned hospital in London, construction workers made a discovery that would unlock nearly 80 years of buried secrets. A metal box, sealed, hidden inside the walls of what was once St. Mary's Hospital, a building that served as a military hospital during the darkest hours of the Second World War. Inside that box were 62 letters, handwritten, dated 1944 to 1945. Letters that would tell a story of love, sacrifice, and the impossible choices that war forces upon us. Letters that a woman named Eleanor Blackwood had hidden, knowing she would never live to see them read. This is not a story of battles or grand heroics. This is the story of what happens when love collides with duty, when two people find each other in the midst of chaos, and when one person chooses to destroy their own happiness to protect everyone else. This is the story of Eleanor Blackwood, a woman who lived two lives, one in the light and one she kept hidden in the darkest corners of her heart until the day she died. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you believe about sacrifice, about the true cost of war, and about the power of love that asks nothing in return. And when this is over, we want to know, if you were Eleanor, if you faced the choice between your own happiness and protecting everyone around you, what would you do? The first thing you need to understand about Eleanor Blackwood is that she was not the kind of woman who made dramatic choices. She was the kind of woman who made quietly devastating ones. In 1944, Eleanor was 28 years old. She had worked as a nurse since she was 20, joining the profession because she believed in something larger than herself. She believed in service, in healing, in the quiet dignity of taking care of people when they were at their most vulnerable. She had never imagined herself as a heroine. She was simply someone who showed up, did her job, and tried to make the suffering slightly less unbearable. By 1944, Eleanor had been working at St. Mary's Hospital in London for 4 years. 4 years of the Second World War. 4 years of watching the city burn. 4 years of picking up pieces, literal pieces, of people and trying desperately to make them whole again. The Blitz had ended in 1941, but the war continued. The hospital received a steady stream of casualties. Soldiers wounded in raids across Europe. RAF pilots shot down over the Channel. Workers injured in factory accidents. Eleanor had learned to move through the hospital with a kind of grace under pressure that impressed even the most seasoned doctors. The hospital staff nicknamed her the Steady One. She never panicked, never raised her voice, never showed fear, even when she was terrified. She had a way of calming patients with just her presence, of making them believe they would survive even when she knew they wouldn't. But Eleanor had learned long ago that there was a price to paying this close attention to people's suffering. The price was loneliness. The price was understanding too much about human pain. The price was keeping it all locked inside yourself. Because if you opened the door, even slightly, everything would pour out, and you would never be able to put it back. She lived alone in a small flat in Kensington. She had been engaged once to a man named Robert, but he had been killed in North Africa in 1942. After that, she never considered marrying again. She decided that her life would be devoted to her work, to the hospital, to the war effort. She would be useful. She would matter. That would be enough. But people are not always as simple as their decisions about themselves. On March 15, 1944, James Hartley was brought to St. Mary's Hospital. He was a flight lieutenant in the RAF, 24 years old. He had been shot down over the Channel and picked up by a fishing boat. His right leg was badly burned. His left arm had shrapnel embedded in it. He should not have survived the crash, but he had. He had survived, and now he lay in one of the hospital's recovery wards in considerable pain, with a wife he had been married to for just 8 months and had not seen in 3 weeks. Eleanor was assigned to his ward. She was the night nurse, which meant she was responsible for monitoring 6 patients through the darkness. James Hartley was one of them. The first letter in the box was dated March 22nd, 1 week after James arrived. "My dearest," it began, though there was no name. "I should not be writing this. I should not be thinking the things I am thinking. But I find myself incapable of pretense, at least not in these pages. Today you asked me if I had a sweetheart. You asked me why a woman as capable as me was not married, not accounted for, not claimed by anyone. And I lied. I told you I had been engaged and he died in the war, which is true, but I did not tell you the real truth, which is that I have never felt the way you make me feel, which is both impossible and entirely real. You are a married man. I am aware of this fact, but facts and reality are 2 different things. Facts are what exist in documents and rings and vows spoken in churches. Reality is what I feel when I help you eat because your arm is too badly damaged. Reality is the way you look at me, really look at me, as if I am not just a uniform and a job, but a person, a woman, someone who matters. I know this is dangerous. I know this is forbidden. But I also know that in times of war, the only real things we have are the moments we steal. And so I am writing this to steal a moment that is entirely mine." Eleanor's first instinct, when she read these words decades later through Daniel Foster's hands, was shock at her own honesty. She had written it all down. She had documented the moment her careful, controlled life had shattered. But reading it now, she understood why she had written it. She had needed to record it. She had needed proof that it was real. James Hartley's recovery was complicated. The burns on his leg became infected. He developed a fever that lasted for 3 days. Eleanor stayed by his bedside during one of her shifts, keeping cool compresses on his forehead, watching his vital signs like a hawk. She was terrified she would lose him. On the 3rd night, when his fever finally broke and he regained consciousness, the first thing he did was look for her. When she came into his field of vision, something in his face changed. His eyes focused. They found her and held her. "You stayed," he said. His voice was hoarse from fever and dehydration. "Of course I stayed," Eleanor replied. "You were my patient." "No," James said quietly. "You stayed. You didn't leave. You were here." And in that moment, Eleanor understood that whatever was happening between them had already moved beyond the realm of professional care. James was married to a woman named Catherine. Catherine worked as a nurse in the maternity ward at the same hospital. The irony was bitter. Eleanor and Catherine had passed each other in the corridors dozens of times. Eleanor knew Catherine by sight, a thin, quiet woman who seemed perpetually worried. Eleanor had heard from other nurses that Catherine and James's marriage was cold, that they had married because it was expected, because both their families approved, because it was what people did in wartime, that Catherine wanted children, and James had already told her he might not survive the war, that the marriage existed on paper but not in spirit. Eleanor knew all of this, and it changed nothing. Knowing that James's marriage was hollow only made everything worse. By the end of March, James was recovering well enough to walk. The doctors said he would return to active duty within 2 months. Eleanor and James had already begun stealing moments, brief conversations in empty corridors, glances held a fraction too long, hands touching when there was no medical reason for them to touch. On April 1st, James asked Eleanor to meet him in the hospital's storage room during her lunch break. Eleanor knew she should refuse. She should have reported the request. Instead, she found herself walking down the narrow stairs at exactly noon, pushing open the heavy door, stepping into the dimness of the storage room where old medical equipment and discarded furniture were kept. James was already there. He looked different in daylight, unfiltered through hospital windows. More real, more solid, more dangerous. "I had to see you," he said, "without witnesses, without pretense." "This is a mistake," Eleanor said, but she didn't leave. "I know," James replied. "It's the biggest mistake of my life, but I can't seem to stop making it." And then he kissed her. The kiss lasted perhaps 30 seconds. It was desperate and tender at the same time. When Eleanor pulled away, her hands were shaking. "We can't do this," she said. "I know," James said again, "but we're going to, aren't we?" Eleanor left without answering, but she was back the next day. Over the course of April and May, Eleanor and James fell into a pattern. Small moments stolen throughout the day. Conversations in the supply room. A hand held in the darkness of the ward at night when other patients were sleeping. Walks through the hospital's back garden when James was strong enough. And through it all, Eleanor was acutely aware of Catherine, moving like a ghost through the same hallways, unaware that her husband was falling in love with someone else. The second letter was dated April 12th. "I am aware that I am a terrible person," Eleanor wrote. "I am complicit in a betrayal. Catherine is a decent woman. She doesn't deserve this. And yet, when I see James, when he looks at me the way he does, when he touches my face and calls me beautiful, I cannot find the strength to end it. I pray for strength. I pray for clarity. I pray for something, anything, that would make this bearable. But God seems very far away these days. All I can hear is James's voice saying my name, and I find that I don't want to stop hearing it. Consequences be damned." What Eleanor could not have known, as she wrote these words in the darkness of her small flat in Kensington, was that she was documenting the last time she would ever allow herself to be reckless. The last time she would choose her own happiness over everything else. The last time she would be selfish enough to believe that love was enough. By May 1944, Eleanor was certain she was pregnant. She knew the signs because she was a nurse, and because she was a woman who paid attention to her own body. She had always been careful, but they had been reckless. Only once. Only one time in the locked staff room in the basement of the hospital, late on a night when both the war and the world seemed very far away. The third letter was dated May 3rd, and it was very short. "I know. I'm certain. I didn't tell him yet. I don't know how. I don't know what he will say or what he will do. I only know that my life has changed in ways I cannot control or understand, and that somewhere inside me something is growing, something that belongs to both of us, something that changes everything." Eleanor told James on May 5th. They were sitting in the hospital's garden, on a bench screened from view by a stone wall and overgrown hedges. It was a warm afternoon. Eleanor had waited for a moment when she could be sure they wouldn't be observed. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. James's face went white. "You're certain?" "Yes." He stood up. He walked away from her. He stood with his back to her for what felt like a very long time. And then he turned back, and Eleanor saw something in his expression that terrified her. It looked like hope. "We have to leave," James said. "We'll go somewhere they won't find us. We'll start over. I'll divorce Catherine. No," Eleanor interrupted. "We won't." "Eleanor, listen to me," Eleanor said, and her voice was steady even though her hands were not. "You're married. You have a wife. You have a life that existed before me, and that will exist after this war is over. A life you chose. I made a mistake," James said. "Catherine and I were a mistake. You know that. Everyone knows that. but you and me, this is real. This is what's supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen is that you remember you're a good man," Eleanor said quietly. "And good men don't abandon their wives. Good men don't destroy their families. Good men don't let a moment of passion during wartime dictate the rest of their lives." "What about our child?" James demanded. "What about the life growing inside you? Don't I have a responsibility to that?" Eleanor's heart broke then. She could feel it happening, a crack forming in her chest, spreading outward like ice across frozen water. "You have a responsibility to be honourable," she said. "That's the only responsibility that matters." "Eleanor, I love you." "I know," she said, "and I love you. But love isn't enough. It never is." The letters that followed documented Eleanor's descent into a kind of cold clarity. She had loved him. She would always love him. But she had decided that this love could not be selfish. It could not be allowed to destroy other people's lives. In the letters dated mid-May through June, Eleanor made her plan. She would carry the pregnancy to term. She would raise the child as a single mother, unmarried but not divorced. Single mothers were pitied, sympathized with, but not ostracized. She would claim the child was the result of a brief relationship with a soldier who had been killed in action. A lie, but a necessary one. A lie that would protect everyone. James could stay married to Catherine. Catherine need never know. James's reputation would remain intact. His career in the RAF could continue uninterrupted. And Eleanor would have their child, something that was entirely, completely hers. Something that would be a reminder that for one brief moment she had dared to love someone completely. The 8th letter, dated June 10th, documented the moment when Eleanor told James this decision. "He cried," Eleanor wrote. "James Hartley, this brave man who has flown fighter planes and been shot down over enemy territory, cried like a child when I told him we couldn't be together. He said I was punishing him. He said I was punishing our child. He said I was being cruel and selfish and small-minded. But the truth is, I was being the opposite of all those things. I was making the only choice that could possibly be considered loving. I was protecting Catherine from a truth that would devastate her. I was protecting James from a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. I was protecting our child from being born into scandal and shame, and I was accepting that my own happiness would have to be sacrificed in the process. That's what love looks like sometimes. It looks like letting go. It looks like saying no. It looks like choosing everyone else's pain over your own. Now, I need to ask you something. What do you think Eleanor did right? What do you think she got wrong? Was she protecting people, or was she making a choice that would haunt her for decades? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss this together. Eleanor left her job at St. Mary's Hospital in July 1944. She told the administrator that she needed to care for her ailing mother in the countryside. It was a lie. She spent the next 8 months in a private nursing home outside of London, where unmarried pregnant women were sent when they needed discretion and care. She gave birth to a daughter on March 2nd, 1945. She named her Nora Eleanor Blackwood. On the birth certificate, under father, she wrote unknown. It was the most honest lie she had ever told. The letters from this period were different from the earlier ones. They were addressed to Nora, not to James, and they read like a mother's confessions to a child who might never read them. Dear Nora, today you are 3 days old, and you are the most perfect thing I have ever seen. You have your father's eyes, dark, intelligent, searching. You have his hands too, delicate and capable. Looking at you, I can see him. Every feature of him is there in you, written into your very being. And I wonder, every moment of every day, if I made a terrible mistake in keeping him from you, if I was wrong to decide for both of us that a secret was better than the truth. But I look at your face, and I also think about the damage that truth would have caused. Catherine would have been destroyed. Your father would have been torn in half by obligation and regret, and you would have been born into a world where you were a symbol of betrayal and shame rather than a symbol of love. So I chose this. I chose to make myself your sole parent. I chose to carry this alone. I pray that someday you'll understand why. Eleanor returned to London in May 1945, 3 months after Nora was born. The war in Europe was over. Victory in the Pacific would come later. The world was beginning to imagine what peace might look like, though most people were too exhausted to feel genuine hope. She found work at a different hospital, on the other side of London, St. Thomas's, where no one knew her, where no one had any reason to connect her to St. Mary's or to the past she was trying to leave behind. She became a single mother working as a nurse, raising her daughter in a cramped flat in Southwark. She never dated again. She never let another man close to her. She never allowed herself the possibility of love again. She devoted herself entirely to Nora. She was the best mother she could be. She was present, loving, attentive, but she was also keeping a secret that would divide her from her own daughter. Nora would grow up never knowing who her father was. She would grow up thinking she was the product of a brief affair with a soldier who died in the war. It was a story that was repeated thousands of times in post-war Britain, and no one questioned it. But Eleanor knew the truth. Eleanor knew that Nora's father was alive, that he had survived the war, that he lived somewhere in England with his wife, possibly with other children, building a normal life. And Eleanor had to live with the knowledge that she had kept a father and daughter apart, that she had denied them each other, all in the name of protection. The final letters in the box, dated 1946 through 1947, showed Eleanor wrestling with the weight of her decision. They showed her questioning whether she had done the right thing. They showed her wondering if she should track down James and tell him about Nora. They showed her, over and over again, coming to the same conclusion. The sacrifice had been made, and it could not be unmade. I wonder sometimes what Nora is losing by not knowing her father, Eleanor wrote in 1947. I wonder if I have robbed her of something she has a right to. But then I think about the life James has with Catherine. I think about whether Catherine ever found happiness with him, or if their marriage remained as cold as it was in 1944. I think about how I would feel if I had to navigate a world where I knew about a child I could never claim. I think about the impossible position I would have put James in, and I tell myself that I made the only choice I could make. Not the easy choice, not the selfish choice, but the choice that required the most sacrifice from me. The very last letter was dated March 2nd, 1960, Nora's 15th birthday. My dearest Nora, it began, though it was addressed to no one but Eleanor herself, not intended to be read until after she was gone. Today, you are 15 years old. You are becoming a woman. You look so much like your father that sometimes it hurts to look at you. But I could never tell you that. I could never tell you who he was. I could never explain why I made the choice I made. You have grown up believing that your father was a soldier who died before you were born. You have grown up with pride in that story, that your father was brave, that he died for his country, that you are the daughter of a hero. That story is a gift I gave you. It is also a lie. The truth is much more complicated and much more painful. Your father is alive. Your father never knew you existed. Your father made a choice when he was a very young man, and I made a choice when I was an even younger woman. Those choices have defined both our lives. I chose, for both of us, that our happiness would be secondary to everyone else's. and I have spent 15 years wondering if I was right. Today, on your 15th birthday, I have decided that I need to hide these letters somewhere safe. Somewhere they will survive me. Somewhere they might eventually tell the story that I could never tell in life. Perhaps someday, long after I am gone, someone will find them and understand what Eleanor Blackwood was trying to protect. Eleanor Blackwood died in 1987. She was 71 years old. She had worked as a nurse for 51 years. She had never remarried. She had never allowed herself another love. Nora had grown up to become a schoolteacher, married a man named David, had 3 children of her own, and lived a full, if somewhat emotionally distant life. She never knew who her biological father was. She never read her mother's letters. She lived with the lie her mother had constructed, believing it to be truth. The letters remained hidden in the walls of St. Mary's Hospital for 37 years after Eleanor's death. Thank you so much for staying with us through Eleanor's story so far. I know what we've just learned is heavy. We've watched a woman sacrifice everything, her love, her happiness, decades of her life, all in the name of protecting other people. We've watched her make an impossible choice and live with it forever. But here's what I need to tell you. The best part of this story is still coming. Because when those letters were discovered, when Eleanor's voice finally reached the world 80 years after she wrote them, something unexpected happened. Someone read them who had the power to change everything. And that's where we're headed next. Daniel Foster was a historian of the Second World War who specialized in the home front, in the stories of civilians and non-combatants whose lives had been shaped by the war in ways that were less visible but no less profound than those of soldiers. He had published several well-regarded books and maintained a blog where he wrote about historical artifacts and the stories they contained. When he was contacted by the construction company demolishing St. Mary's Hospital and informed about the discovery of the letters, he was skeptical. Over the years, many supposed historical artifacts had turned out to be hoaxes, or the sentimental writings of people who were desperate to feel that their lives had been historically significant. But the moment he held the letters, he knew they were real. The paper was authentic. The ink was authentic. The handwriting was consistent across all 62 letters, showing the progression of a woman's life, from the excited, slightly uneven script of someone in early love, through the careful, controlled handwriting of someone making a devastating decision, to the worn, weary handwriting of someone who had learned to live with loss. Daniel spent 3 weeks reading the letters, making notes, checking facts. He discovered records of Eleanor Blackwood working at St. Mary's Hospital from 1940 to 1944. He found her employment record at St. Thomas's Hospital from 1945 to 1987. He found the birth certificate for Nora Eleanor Blackwood, born March 2, 1945, with unknown listed as the father's name. But what he really wanted to find was James Hartley. It took another week, but he eventually located James's RAF service record. Flight Lieutenant James Edmund Hartley, born 1920, married to Catherine Ann Whitmore in 1943. Shot down over the Channel on March 8, 1944. Hospitalized for 2 months. Returned to active duty June 1944. Survived the war. Discharged with honours in 1946. Daniel found an address for James Hartley in Cambridge. He sent a letter explaining that he was a historian and that he had discovered some documents related to St. Mary's Hospital during the war that he thought Mr. Hartley might find interesting. He asked if they could meet. 3 weeks later, he received a response. It was written in shaky handwriting on the back of an official postcard. I can't read whatever it is you've found. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but my son suggested I speak to you. He said it might be important. Please come to Cambridge next Tuesday at 2 p.m. We can meet at the Eagle pub on Bennett Street. Daniel went to Cambridge on a cold Tuesday in February 2024. James Hartley was 94 years old. He was sitting in a booth in the Eagle, a pint in front of him, a younger man, his son Michael, sitting beside him. Daniel sat down across from them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel laid out the letters on the table. Not all of them, just a few of the most significant ones, in a protective plastic sleeve. James Hartley went very pale. His son reached for his hand. "Where did you find these?" James asked quietly. "Hidden in the walls of St. Mary's Hospital," Daniel said. "During demolition. I'm a historian. I'm trying to understand the story. I'm trying to make sure it's told correctly." James picked up the first letter with trembling hands. He read it. His eyes filled with tears. "I need to tell you something," James said, "that I have not told anyone, not even my wife, not even my children, for 80 years. I need to tell you about Eleanor Blackwood." James Hartley had survived the war. He had gone back to his wife Catherine. He had eventually learned to care for her, not with passion, but with a kind of dutiful affection. They had lived together for 53 years before Catherine died in 1996. They had one child together, Michael, who was now 62 years old and listening to his father's confession for the first time. But James had never forgotten Eleanor. He had spent 80 years wondering what happened to her. He had spent 80 years knowing that she had made a choice, that she had chosen to let him go, to protect his marriage, to protect his reputation. He had tried to be grateful for that. He had tried to tell himself that she had done the right thing. But in his heart, he had always wondered about her. He had always wondered what his life might have been like if they had run away together, as he had wanted, if they had been brave instead of honourable, if they had chosen love instead of duty. "And I met Eleanor Blackwood on March 15th, 1944, James said, "and I fell in love with her immediately. Not gradually, not over time, but all at once, completely, irrevocably. She was the night nurse in my ward. She was kind and competent and the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. And more than that, she was the first person in my entire life who saw me, not as a soldier or a title or an RAF uniform, but as a human being, as James. I had been married for 8 months to Catherine. We had married because our families expected it. We married without love or passion or any real connection. It was a practical arrangement, nothing more. And then Eleanor came into my hospital room, and suddenly I understood what it meant to love someone. Michael was listening with an expression of shock and sadness. His whole life he had believed his parents had a normal marriage, a respectable marriage. He was only now learning that his father had been in love with another woman. "She was pregnant," James continued. "Eleanor told me she was carrying my child. I wanted to leave Catherine. I wanted to marry Eleanor. I wanted to start a new life with her and our baby. But Eleanor refused. She said I was a good man, and that good men didn't abandon their wives. She said that my responsibility was to honour the commitments I had made, even if I had made them for the wrong reasons. She said that she would raise our child alone, and that I would never have to know that the child existed. She said that was her gift to me." James paused here. He took a sip of his beer with a shaking hand. "I told her she was cruel," he said quietly. "I told her she was being selfish and self-righteous. I told her that she was robbing me and my child of each other. I was angry with her. I was furious with her. But in my heart, I knew she was right. I knew that if she had let me go with her, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. My career would have been destroyed. Catherine would have been devastated. The shame would have followed all of us forever. Eleanor saw that clearly when I could not. Eleanor was willing to sacrifice her own happiness to protect everyone else. even though it meant that I would never know my own child, even though it meant that she would live her entire life alone. Did you ever try to find them? Daniel asked. After the war, when things had settled down. I tried, James said. Once, in 1947, I hired someone to look for Eleanor Blackwood. He told me that there was an Eleanor Blackwood working as a nurse at St. Thomas's Hospital. I went to the hospital. I watched the nursing staff come and go. I was looking for a woman with dark hair and a particular way of moving, a particular grace. And I thought I saw her. I thought I saw Eleanor coming out of the hospital one evening, and she was carrying a little girl, a child with dark hair, maybe 2 or 3 years old. And I knew it was my daughter. I stood there in the shadows, watching them disappear into the darkness, and I knew that I could not follow them. Eleanor had made her choice, and I had to respect that choice. Did you ever tell Catherine? Michael asked his father. No, James said. Catherine never knew. She never suspected. By the time I tried to find Eleanor, Catherine and I had settled into a kind of comfortable routine. We were 2 people sharing a life, but not truly connected. It was not a bad marriage, but it was not a good one either. We were cordial. We were partners in the practical sense. But there was no passion, no intimacy beyond the physical. Catherine was a good woman, and she deserved a husband who loved her the way I loved Eleanor. But I couldn't give her that. No one could have. James looked down at the letters again, at Eleanor's handwriting, at her words. I have lived 94 years, he said quietly. I have lived a full life. I have had a career. I have had a son. I have had grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I have been respected and honoured. By all external measures, I have been successful, but I have spent every single day of those 94 years thinking about Eleanor Blackwood, wondering if I did the right thing by letting her go, wondering if I should have fought harder for her, wondering who my daughter was, what her name was, what kind of life she lived, wondering if she ever knew about me. Eleanor made her choice 80 years ago, and that choice has defined my entire life. Because the truth is, I would have followed her anywhere. I would have abandoned everything for her, and she knew that, and she chose to save me from myself. Daniel felt tears running down his face as he listened to this old man, this 94-year-old man, finally speak the truth that had lived inside him for most of his life. I need to tell you something else, James said, something that I discovered on my own many years ago. In 1975, I saw a photograph of Nora Blackwood in the Cambridge Evening News. She was mentioned as receiving an award from the local school board for her contributions to education. Nora Eleanor Blackwood, teacher. And I knew instantly that she was my daughter. She had a particular look about her, something in the set of her jaw, something in the intelligence behind her eyes, something that was unmistakably mine. And I thought about reaching out to her. I thought about telling her who I was. But I didn't, because Eleanor had made a choice, and I respected that choice. If Eleanor had wanted Nora to know about me, Eleanor would have told her, so I stayed silent. I watched my daughter live her life from a distance, and I was grateful for that much. Daniel left Cambridge that evening with photocopies of the letters and a recording of James's confession. He had what he needed to tell the full story now. But there was one more piece of the puzzle. Nora Blackwood was now 78 years old. She was retired, living in Cambridge, widowed, with 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren. Daniel contacted her through her daughter and asked if they could meet. Nora was initially reluctant. She didn't understand why a historian would be interested in her mother. But when Daniel explained what he had found, the letters, the story of Eleanor and James, the hidden daughter, Nora agreed to speak with him. They met at Nora's home on a sunny afternoon in early March. Nora read the letters slowly, methodically, taking time to absorb each one. By the time she finished, she had cried enough tears to fill several oceans. "My mother," she said quietly, "lived her entire life in service to other people. She sacrificed her own happiness. She sacrificed her own love. She raised me alone, working long hours at the hospital, denying herself any pleasure or comfort beyond what was necessary for survival. And she did all of this to protect people she believed needed protecting, to protect my father, whom I never knew, to protect my father's wife, to protect me from the shame of illegitimacy. I spent my entire childhood wondering why my mother seemed so sad, why she was always distant, why she never laughed or smiled or seemed to enjoy anything. And now I understand. She was living under the weight of a choice she had made when she was 29 years old. She was carrying that weight for the rest of her life." Nora paused, collecting herself. "My father," she continued, "never knew I existed. That was the agreement Eleanor made. He would never know. But did he find out? Did he eventually learn about me?" Daniel explained what James had told him, that James had seen Nora, that he had recognized her as his daughter, but that he had respected Eleanor's choice and never made contact. Nora was quiet for a long time. "I need to meet him," she said finally. "I'm 78 years old. My father is 94. If I'm going to meet him, it has to be now." 3 weeks later, on a cold afternoon in March 2024, on what would have been Eleanor's 94th birthday, Daniel later realized, Nora and James met for the first time. They met in a cafe in Cambridge, and Daniel was there to witness it. James was very old. He was fragile. His hands shook as he held his coffee. But when he saw Nora, when he really saw her, face to face, no longer from a distance, something shifted in his expression. He saw Eleanor. He saw himself. He saw his daughter. "You look like your mother," he said, his voice breaking. "You have her eyes. You have her strength. I can see her in you." "I have your hands," Nora replied, looking at his weathered fingers. "I've always wondered where I got these hands. My mother's were different." They talked for 3 hours. Nora told James about Eleanor. She told him that Eleanor had been a devoted mother, that she had sacrificed everything for her daughter, that she had died having never spoken to another soul about Nora's father. James told Nora about his life with Catherine, about his career in the RAF, about his children and grandchildren. He told her that he had seen her once in 1947, when she was a small child, and that he had known immediately who she was. "Your mother wanted to protect me," James said. "She wanted to protect all of us. She wanted to make sure that I didn't sacrifice my future for a love affair, no matter how real that love was. She wanted to make sure that your father's wife was never hurt by the truth. She wanted to make sure that you were raised with dignity, even if that dignity was built on a lie. She did all of that, even though it meant she would spend her entire life alone, even though it meant she would never have the life she wanted. That's what true love looks like, I think. It's not the romantic kind of love. It's the kind of love that's willing to be invisible, that's willing to ask nothing in return, that's willing to let go completely." Nora began to cry, and James, this 94-year-old man, who had waited 80 years to know his daughter, reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry your mother had to carry this alone." "She made her choice," Nora replied, "and she was at peace with it. Near the end of her life, when she was very ill, she used to say that she had no regrets. She said that she had lived a full life, that she had helped thousands of people as a nurse, that she had raised a daughter she was proud of. She said that she had experienced love, true, deep, transformative love, even if she had only experienced it For a brief moment in time, she said that most people never get even that much. After the meeting, Nora decided to do what her mother had apparently intended to do: release Eleanor's story to the world. She worked with Daniel to organize the letters and create a book. She gave interviews. She spoke publicly about her mother's sacrifice, her father's hidden love, the cost of the choices that war forces upon us. The letters were published online. They went viral. Thousands of people read Eleanor's words and were moved to tears. Women who had sacrificed their own happiness for their families. Men who had kept their love secret out of respect for the commitments they had made. People who had lived two lives, one in public, one in private. Eleanor's story gave them permission to acknowledge what they had endured. And you have now heard Eleanor's story. You know what she sacrificed. You know what her love cost her. You know that she lived 71 years, and that she spent more than 60 of those years living alone, carrying a secret, wondering if she had made the right choice. What do you think? Do you believe Eleanor made the right decision? Do you think she should have run away with James? Do you think she should have told Nora the truth? Or do you believe that she was right to prioritize everyone else's well-being over her own? These are not simple questions. There are no easy answers. But I think Eleanor would want us to ask them. I think she would want us to think deeply about what we sacrifice for love and what we sacrifice for duty, and whether those two things are ever really in opposition. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done. Tell us what you think Eleanor's legacy is. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the choices you've made and the sacrifices you've endured, please subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are coming. Stories of people who lived invisible lives, who made impossible choices, who loved in ways that changed the world, even if the world never knew their names. And don't leave yet. We have another story waiting for you. Another story about love, sacrifice, and the hidden lives we live. Click on the next video and continue this journey with us.